The shocking truth behind my family's dark secrets. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. My father, who sneered at night shift nurses, whispered, "Please, save me." He said it at 2:11 a.m., voice thin to a stranger's, while my unit's cardiac monitors sang their clipped metallic lullabies. I was on break, coffee cooling in a paper cup, charting respiratory rates with the stubborn precision that once made him laugh. I'm Noah, 30, ICU nights at St. Elm's, one of the anonymous people who hold strangers' hands when their families can't. My job isn't glamorous, it is measurable. Vitals don't lie, outcomes don't pose, and effort shows even when nobody is clapping. I believed in that because belief kept me steady when nothing else did. Victor Hale built his life like a billboard, tasteful fonts, no shadows. He taught us to smile for cameras and never read contracts in public. He called me a bandage boy the night I graduated. He told me I should aim for hospital administrator, something with a suit. I chose the work anyway. The work chose me back, and lately that stubborn choice has cost me dinners, birthdays, and a seat at his long table. I figured distance was dignity. Then the distance dialed. He did not ask how my shift was going. He did not ask if I had eaten. "Noah," he said, "there are papers coming. You'll see things online. You must shield the family. I need you." The word need sat oddly in his mouth, like a borrowed tie. Behind him, I could hear glass clicking, the way ice sounds when a hand circles a tumbler too fast. I stepped into the stairwell and felt the hospital sigh around me, the way buildings do at night when the elevators rest. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Small errors," he said. "Temporary. People are skittish. You know how institutions are." I know institutions. They are slow, blunt, and implacable. They also leave records. He knows I know that. He told me to meet him after shift, to come alone, to forget my habit of writing everything down. I stared at my pen. I thought of the one staff rule that matters. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. If I agree to help him, I risk my license and my name. When I was 8, Victor timed my shoelaces. "Winners move fast," he said, clicking a gold stopwatch he only wore at home. When I was 12, he made me return a trophy my coach gave me for most improved. "Either you win or you decorate failure," he said, and the living room laughed because that's what money trained it to do. By high school, he brought me to charity galas as a prop, boy in a gray suit, quiet, useful for photographs with donors who loved insisting the future belonged to self-starters. My future started in laundromats and after-school shifts, counting tips and learning that quiet work buys loud groceries. I learned to make beds tight and promises tighter. He loved Mara because she was a mirror, elegant, quick with names, fluent in the language of entrances. I loved Mara because, behind closed doors, she cried for stray dogs and kept our grandmother's cracked mixing bowl hidden in her closet like a relic. Aunt Gloria said the bowl was from before Victor rehearsed, and sometimes she held it with both hands like a memory could still be warm. My mother used to stand between us and his weather. After she died, the house learned to obey the forecast on his face. Last month, at a restaurant where the napkins were heavier than my winter coat, he gave me his newest lesson. A donor asked what I did. "Nursing," I said, and Victor's smile narrowed the way doors do when you catch them. "Night shift," he added. He prefers the company of machines. Laughter. I held the water glass. I counted the bubbles. Later, in the car, he told me I smell like bleach and small ambitions. He said if I wanted a real future, I should let him place me at the law firm that handles serious matters. I told him I already handled life and death. He said, "Don't be dramatic, Noah. Everyone dies anyway." He loves philosophies that fit on cocktail napkins. He loves advice that costs me something and earns him applause. The last time we spoke before his midnight plea, he texted me a link to a condo listing with a note. "If you aim higher, I'll co-sign, assuming you quit nights." He always framed control as generosity. I didn't realize the strings were ropes. The first wrong number call came to the nurse's station on a Wednesday. A man asked for the Hale family office and, hearing my name, launched into a panicked monologue about the pledge not clearing. I told him he had the wrong line. He told me he had the right Noah, then hung up. 2 days later, I collected mail from my apartment lobby and found a letter with my father's company crest, but addressed to me. Inside was a copy of a lien notice filed against Hale Community Promise Foundation at the county recorder's office. The amount looked like a telephone number until I read the commas twice. I tasted paper. I put the envelope down like it might alarm. I brought the paper to Aunt Gloria. She held it to the light and squinted as if a kinder message might appear in the watermark. "Your father hates paper trails," she said. "If this reached you, something slipped." We read it again, line by line. Amount: $486,000. Basis: unpaid invoice and a disputed guarantee. County stamp dated 2 weeks earlier. I remembered Victor's grin at that heavy napkin restaurant, how he held court like a man who believed reality negotiated. Meanwhile, at the estate, a senior staffer named Eliza vanished from the weekly schedule. Mara said Eliza had chosen to pursue art, which sounded like a fundraiser's way of saying she stopped asking questions. Victor posted golf photos and captions about stewardship. I told myself the lien was clerical error and the wrong number call a prank by someone who knew our last name. I wanted to believe his gravity field could still hold. That afternoon I pulled a double. Bed 9 needed dopamine. Bed 12's daughter needed someone to translate a ventilator curve into hope. Between alarms, disputed guarantee kept looping. In medicine, guarantees are superstition. In finance, weapons. On break, I checked county records. 2 supplier suits naming our foundation, 1 dismissed, 1 pending. At 4:03 a.m., a private number rang. Voicemail: Crown Ridge Capital Partners. The caller mispronounced our name and pronounced threat perfectly. Driving home, I passed the estate, trimmed hedges, and a catering van. The world said party. The paperwork said pressure. Back in my kitchen, the notices P.O. box didn't match Victor's by 1 digit. Sloppy or intentional misdirection. Then the banker called me by my first name asking for updated documentation. Victor staged his confidence like theater. That evening he hosted donors at the downtown museum. Soft lights, softer lies, while a string quartet rehearsed in a room that smelled like polished stone. I stood at the back in my scrubs, straight from nights, because he told me to observe how adults solve problems. He clasped my shoulder for the photographers. "My son," he said, "dedicated to community health. He keeps our city breathing." He let the applause balance on that sentence like a waiter testing a tray. 10 minutes later, with the crowd thin near the sculpture garden, he leaned down and hissed, "Try not to sweat on the art, Noah." People laugh because people are trained to. He called me useful optics before stepping onto a small stage to announce a temporary bridge loan that would unlock new community clinics. The word temporary ricocheted inside me. Bridges keep you dry until they flood. During dessert, a woman with diamonds like satellites asked if I liked playing nurse. I said I liked preventing funerals. She said funerals had excellent catering these days. When the event wound down, Victor slipped me a folded note. Destroy after reading. Inside were 3 names, a bank, and a date. Monday, 9 a.m. "They're friends," he whispered. "Vouch for me if asked." I told him nurses vouch for the conscious. Bankers vouch for collateral. He told me to stop performing ethics for small audiences. In the parking circle, our family driver avoided my eyes. Mara arrived in a silver dress that made any room rearrange itself. "Don't start," she warned before I even spoke. "Dad needs steady people now." "He needs the truth," I said. "He needs loyalty," she said. "They're the same when you love someone." Back at the museum doors, a man in a cheap suit waited like an errand. He checked a clipboard, walked toward us, and asked for Victor by full legal name. Security shifted. The quartet stopped mid-phrase as if the music had been caught. The man held a thick envelope, looked at me, and said, "You're Noah? You can take this." And then a process server stepped into the lobby, envelope raised. The envelope made a soft slap when it landed in my hand, like a fish that didn't yet know it was out of water. "Service accepted," the man said, and turned so efficiently it felt like he owed speed interest. Victor's face didn't move. Only his ring finger did, tapping his glass in tight, economical fury. "Give that to legal," he told me, which meant burn it and forget the odor. I tucked it under my arm and heard the quartet restart as if nothing had tilted. In the car, Mara took the envelope and stared at my name on the outside. "Why you?" she asked. "Because dull people are useful," I said, immediately ashamed of the bitterness curling in my mouth. She inhaled, held it, let it go like a trained diver. Dad's under pressure, she said. A few vendors, a delayed investment, some exaggerated rumors. Do not make this bigger. I asked if the charity's P.O. box had changed by one digit. She blinked too slowly. Details are beneath you, she said. They're the only thing beneath me, I said. At Aunt Gloria's bungalow, the kitchen light was warm and honest. We spread the papers on the table. Summons. Demand letter. A draft complaint referencing guarantees executed by Victor Hale through the Hale Community Promise Foundation. Dates. Last spring through 3 weeks ago. Amounts with too many zeros to be accidents. Aunt Gloria read in silence, then poured tea like Triov. He hates paper, she repeated. He hates anything that can be held up to the sun. I can talk to him, Mara said. We'll reframe this. A misunderstanding. Misunderstandings don't get process served, I said. Aunt Gloria tapped a paragraph with her knuckle. Noah, she said, your mother told me once that money quieted this house. Quiet is not the same as peace. Mara's phone flashed. Victor, calling. She answered. We're handling it, she said. Then, to me, palm over the speaker. No statements to anyone. You don't know enough to help. She listened, nodded, mouthed please, and hung up. He wants you to lie low, she said. No digging. No checking public records. No talking to enemies. I said I wasn't his employee. She said I was still his son. That's not a contract, I said, but the word son felt like iron in my chest. Aunt Gloria's eyes were sad as floodlights. She said the money always hid something, and tonight it screamed. I told myself I'd sleep. Instead, I watched the ceiling paint learn dawn. My shift started again at 7 that evening. I set a timer for a cautious nap and lasted 9 minutes. The envelope on my table looked heavier than paper. I opened it again, read the notary's stamps, traced Victor's cursive like a detective touching a ghost. Down the side margin of one guarantee, a handwritten initial that was his and not his, confident, but leaning wrong, as if copied by memory under pressure. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mr. Hale? A voice said. This is Crown Ridge Capital. We require updated documentation regarding the pledge accounts. I said I was not Victor. Then perhaps you can assist, the voice said, and named the Hale Community Promise Foundation as if it were a password. I asked what documentation. Proof of funds, revised donor ledger, and the second device verification, he said. My mouth walked ahead of me. What second device? Silence. A click, then a professional smile poured through the line. The number ending in 17. 17. Mara's birthday. The hairs on my arm learned a new posture. After the call ended, I drove to the estate. The gate camera recognized me with the sluggish affection of an old dog. Victor's study door was closed. The housekeeper said he was on a strategic call. I went to the guest room where I sometimes napped during holidays and opened the closet. Behind a garment bag hung a small fireproof box. Combination locked. I guessed. I failed. I guessed again with the year of my mother's death. The latch sighed. Inside, a slim black phone, dusty with disuse, wrapped in a monogrammed handkerchief like contraband with manners. Next to it, a printed email, subject line, audit questions, and a default notice addressed to the Family Foundation. The phone booted to a grid of apps with names that pretended to be calendars and weather. One tap asked for a passcode. I tried Mara's birthday. A chime accepted me like a club I'd never wanted to enter. Messages populated. Pseudonyms talking like old friends about markers and extensions. Spreadsheets attached. Transfers routed through a vendor with a saint's name and a shell's address. My stomach folded. On a notes app, a list. Charity luncheon. Cover $38,000 from vendor fund. Repay post-auction. That was March 12th. My patient in bed 9 coded March 12th, and I'd missed the auction. I had saved a stranger while our surname sold moral fireworks. The passcode unlocked a burner inbox named for my mother. Seated at my kitchen table with the black phone dimming between my hands, I started feeding myself small, digestible pieces of reality. A text from S. Vendor. Cleared $55,000 to Tall Oaks Casino markers. Use Saint. Invoice number 414. A reply from V. Good. Double after gala. Keep the press list sweet. Email from Harbor Trust Private. Pledge collateral. Need deed copy for confirmation. Attached was a scan of my mother's house deed. The one Victor promised would be sacred. The scan included a sticky note in his handwriting. Temporary. Patel to unwind after bridge. I tasted metal. I needed verification beyond my outrage. I visited North Bank, the small branch where Victor kept legacy accounts he called grandfathered deals. The manager remembered me from childhood lollipops and awkward ties. I can't discuss clients, she said, then lowered her voice. But hypothetically, if a charity's operating account shows repetitive transfers to a for-profit vendor sharing a board member's home address, a regulator might use the word improper. I asked hypothetically about liens. They get filed when polite requests die, she said. Next, I met Eliza, the ex-assistant, at a cafe where the napkins were honest again. He loved the word leverage, she said, fingers tight around a paper cup. Not financially, emotionally. The vendor's a shell. It paid off private markers. There's also hush. She looked at the door. Someone he thought could ruin the brand. She slid a thumb drive across the table. Dates, calendar invites, non-disclosure payments. I'm leaving town. I mapped the files against Victor's public posts. Gala night, transfer, speech, marker paid. Board meeting, donation announced, deed copy requested. The patterns held like teeth. On April 27th, a large wire went out labeled St. Mercy Catering, which doesn't exist. On April 28th, Crown Ridge texted grace period ends. When I checked the county recorder again, I found a pending notice to encumber my mother's house. The browser window blurred. On my way home, the black phone vibrated with a new message from Harbor. We need authenticating voice, not voicemail. Use your son if necessary. I read it twice, then a third time, then felt the floor list. Every timestamp disagreed with Victor, and one withdrawal carried my signature. I didn't know the why, and that made every what feel sharper. I booked an afternoon hour at the records office, the room with the fluorescent hum, and the clerk who speaks only in statutes. The file on the Hale Community Promise Foundation was thick, but not ancient. Fresh filings pressed against each other like nervous commuters. In the middle, a grant cycle memo Victor had signed with sweeping confidence, authorizing vendor disbursements for community engagement. The vendor, St. Mercy, LLC. Address, a rented mailbox next to a dry cleaner. I traced signatures. One matched. One twitched, like a hand disguised as another hand. I filed a request to copy. The clerk stamped each page with a rectangular truth. At the bank, a junior officer with polite shoulders agreed to talk generally. He had a window plant and the haunted look of a man learning that numbers keep secrets. If a foundation pledges a property as collateral, he said, there should be board approval in minutes. If there aren't minutes, there's risk. I asked, and if the property wasn't the foundation's to pledge? He didn't answer. He rearranged his pens, a ritual for questions that shouldn't exist. Regulators like clean lines, he said finally. People draw messy ones. Eliza's thumb drive held a calendar entry titled Quiet Meeting, Harbor/Press. Cross-reference with transfers, a $38,000 catering payment the day before, a $76,500 advertising payment the day after. Notes. Use therapy grant language if cornered. My mother's deed sat inside a draft email labeled collateral packet, attachment icon grinning like an open mouth. In a separate folder marked personal, I found correspondence to a private number. Quarterly statements from Tall Oaks Casino, addressed to Mr. H. He had been gambling not just with money, but with our mother's address. I called Mara. We need to talk face-to-face, I said. She arrived in oversized sunglasses like they might protect her from daylight facts. I showed her the deed copy. She went still, then switched languages mid-breath. This is... Dad would never. He promised. I told her promises don't notarize. She asked, why would he do this? The truth was I had a list of possible motives and a smaller list of tolerable ones. Then a new message pinged on the black phone. Transfer complete. Hush settled. Expect call. And suddenly the fake charity had paid for silence with our home. I started a ledger the way I start critical drips. Slow, measured, double-checked. Dates, amounts, accounts, destinations, initials. I printed statements and slid them into a binder with cheap tabs that squeaked as they learned their positions. I recorded one call with Harbor Trust, reading their verification boilerplate back to them, so the audio felt formal even when my heart ran. I emailed myself screenshots of the burner inbox, then disabled previews, then printed to PDF, then wrote time and place on the margins because ink knows courts better than memory. If I was going to confront a man who curated reality, I needed reality to behave. Attorney Patel answered on the third ring, voice clipped, breath calm. I told her I required a consult, not representation, yet. I explained what I had and what I feared. She listened without interrupting, then said, bring originals and copies. Number your exhibits. Document chain of custody. Do not tip them off. And Noah, do not use any login you weren't authorized to use. I felt my stomach drop. I opened a device in the house, I admitted. Silence. Then, we will discuss the implications. For now, preserve, don't explore. Mara called again, voice rinsed raw. He's spiraling, she said. He wants you here for dinner. He says family must close ranks. I looked at my binder, my careful tabs, my trembling hands. If I go, I said, I'm not going to be sweet. She said, just don't be cruel. I said, truth sounds cruel to people who fear it. Before the dinner, I stopped by Aunt Gloria's. We made coffee strong enough to lean on. I never liked that foundation logo, she said. All shine, no weight. I told her my plan. Gather proof, present options, set conditions. You can't treat this like a patient with perfect compliance, she warned. This is addiction braided with pride. I asked if exposing him would kill whatever family remained. Exposing him might be the first time you meet the real family, she said. As I left, my phone vibrated. Crown Ridge again, this time a voicemail stitched with velvet threat. Deadlines inspire clarity, Mr. Hale. Pledges become payments, or reputations adjust. I hit save and labeled it Exhibit 12. I walked toward dinner replaying the words collateral packet until they tasted like iron filings. He still believed I would choose loyalty over oxygen and evidence tonight. Victor conducted dinners like board meetings dressed in steaks. The table was long, the flowers taller than the conversation, the glassware precise like grammar. He rose when I entered, a choreography for witnesses, and kissed Mara's hair as if kisses could notarize family. Noah, he said, sit where I can see you. He poured me wine I didn't want and made a joke about nurses needing fortification. I set the glass down untouched, small rebellion pretending to be manners. Bridge loan is handled, he announced to the room, though the only audience was us and the staff. A few bad actors attempted to exploit a momentary cash flow delay. He smiled as if the delay were a charming personality quirk. I asked, which actors? He said, people who like suing because their fathers didn't love them. It was a performance, cruelty masked as wit. He turned to me. You will avoid idle speculation at work, he said. Hospitals leak. I said, so do foundations. The air thinned. He picked up his knife the way men pick up pens in depositions. Do you know what keeps families intact? He asked. Not truth, discretion. I thought of ventilators and families begging for unvarnished lab results. Truth keeps people alive, I said. Discretion keeps politicians employed. He flicked his gaze at Mara. She touched my wrist under the table. Please, she whispered, just eat. I took out my phone and set it face down on the linen like a card. He leaned back. Rules? He asked, amused. Receipts, I said. I started to speak. The lien, the vendor, the calendar entries, the deed copy. He interrupted. You have always misunderstood scale, he said. Small people panic at large numbers. I slid a printed page across the table, the default notice addressed to the foundation. He didn't touch it. You will not embarrass this family, he said. You will not sniff around like a dog in a garden. I kept my voice even. Then explain St. Mercy. Explain Tall Oaks. Explain why Harbor has our deed. He stood so fast the chair barked against marble. Lower your voice, he said. I wasn't loud. I was steady. Aunt Gloria's words pulsed, addiction braided with pride. He reached for the page and saw the black phone sitting beside my plate. He smiled too calmly and asked where I had found his mother's name. I expected shouting. He offered theater. He sat, folded his hands, and arranged his expression into paternal patience. You made a mistake, he said. You trespassed. I thought of ventilator alarms and how we cut through propriety to reach a pulse. I preserved evidence, I said. He glanced at the staff. The staff became furniture. Aunt Gloria, he called into the hall without turning. You always liked drama. Join us. She did, slow and unsurprised. He nodded toward her. You see? Family. We handle our own. Then, to me, put away the toy. You don't understand the ecosystem. I opened the binder. Exhibit tabs winked like teeth. You used the foundation to route cash to a shell corporation, I said. You pledged Mom's house as collateral without board approval. You paid casino markers as engagement and hush as therapy grants. He laughed. Words are flexible, he said. And so is goodwill. Tomorrow morning, I said, we meet Attorney Patel and Ms. Cordray at Harbor. You will authorize full disclosure. Mara will attend. Mara flinched like a wire. Why? Victor asked, still smiling. Because sunlight is cheaper than litigation, I said. Because if you don't come clean, I file. He leaned in until his cologne felt like weather. You think regulators care about nurses? He said softly. You think the press cares about sons? They care about narrative, and I wrote ours years ago. I met his eyes. Narratives burn, I said. Paper doesn't. He tried a different instrument, guilt. Your mother would be ashamed, he said. Aunt Gloria's jaw locked. Do not outsource blame to the dead, she said. She kept the lights on while you rehearsed. Mara reached for his hand. He let her, then withdrew. Fine, he said, we'll meet your lawyer. But you misread the stakes. This isn't crime, it's risk. In the quiet after his compliance, I heard the engine behind it. A calculation, not surrender. He tapped the black phone screen with two knuckles like a priest blessing a chalice. Bring your exhibits, he said. We'll clear this. He smiled like a man who had already planned a darker room than ours. And then he asked Mara to fetch the deed, calling it a family heirloom. We arrived at Harbor Trust in a tableau. Victor in a suit that explained itself, Mara in beige armor, Aunt Gloria in her church jacket, me in scrub pants under a plain sweater because symbolism is cheaper than suits. Ms. Cordray from Harbor had a professional smile and eyes that had seen every species of entitlement. Attorney Patel was precise in navy and notes. We sat in a glass room where reflections watched us, trying to be honest. Victor opened with a joke about transparency as the new black, and the room did not laugh. Patel began. We are here to reconcile pledge documentation, collateral references, and disbursement destinations for the Hale Community Promise Foundation, she said. She slid a list across the table. We request board minutes authorizing any guarantee secured by non-foundation assets. Victor adjusted his cuff. Board minutes are outdated, he said. We operate with trust. Cordray said. Regulators prefer paper. I laid out exhibits 1 to 14. The binder felt heavier in the center of the table, a gravity we could finally measure. Transfer ledgers, calendar entries, copies of invoices to St. Mercy, the Tall Oak statements, and the deed scan with sticky note. Patel walked Victor through each item, voice neutral, pace relentless. These therapy grants correspond to non-disclosure agreements, she said. These engagement expenses correspond to casino markers. Cordray added. And this deed cannot secure a pledge without recorded consent from the owner of record. Aunt Gloria looked at the deed like it had teeth. Victor's smile failed at the corners. I work to protect this family, he said. Patel nodded. Protection is not a legal defense for misappropriation or fraudulent conveyance, she said. It is, however, motive. There it was, the word that makes narratives stand up. I watched his mask tug, then tear. You don't understand, he said, voice dipping into something closer to truth. It wasn't just gambling. There was pressure. Someone who could ruin us. Years. Mara whispered, who? He looked at the table as if answers hid in grain. A son I never acknowledged, he said. The room chilled. He found me. He wanted money. I paid to keep you safe from scandal. From headlines. Patel's pen paused. Blackmail is a crime, she said. So is laundering hush via a charity, Cordray added. Victor stared at me, pleading and commanding in one look. Now you see the stakes, he said. Now you see why I needed you. And with that confession, every receipt turned into a loaded weapon aimed carefully. I thought a confession would soften the edges. It sharpened them. Patel closed her folder like a verdict. Cordray typed a note and stood. Next steps, Patel said, steady as clamps. Suspend all foundation disbursements. Bring in a forensic accountant. Notify the State Charity Bureau and demand release of the deed. Victor nodded without agreeing. Performance is a language he speaks natively. By afternoon, Harbor froze activity pending review. The PR firm drafted phrases that sounded like apologies in armor, temporary imbalance, best practices, legacy of service. I watched those words wobble around receipts stacked like tiles. Mara called donors and ended with, "We appreciate your discretion." Aunt Gloria brewed coffee and listed people we owed straight answers. I made a list of numbers that must go to Patel, not me. News moves like water once it finds a slope. By evening, a local blog posted. By morning, bigger papers called with questions shaped like accusations. Victor tried, authentic contrition, failed, and defaulted to charm. Charm against paper is dancing against a wall. At the hospital, I caught side glances when the headline crawled under the weather. "You good, Noah?" Jamal asked, offering a donut like a flotation device. I said I was fine and overpronounced fine. Bed 5 wanted warm blankets. Bed 9's daughter needed a ventilator explained without poetry. An administrator pulled me aside. "We need to be careful about media proximity," she said gently. "Keep your surname quiet. Keep the hospital outside the blast radius." I nodded. Victor called hourly, sometimes demanding, sometimes pleading. "You cannot let them freeze the accounts," he said. Mara's stipend, and stopped. Aunt Gloria fielded friends who wanted permission to be cowards politely. "We're praying for discretion," one said. "Pray for truth," she replied, and hung up. That night a reporter found my door, polite, persistent, questions like flowers with thorns. "Off the record?" she asked. "I'm off the clock," I said, and closed the door softly. Inside, the black phone began to ring with a number I didn't recognize. Therapy is a word that made Victor smile at parties and wince in private. I booked it anyway. Dr. Ramirez listened as I described a house where applause substituted for affection and power disguised itself as protection. "Boundaries," she said, "will feel like betrayal to people who benefited from your lack of them." We sketched a plan that treated the mess as both trauma and logistics. Sleep, shift swaps, no midnight calls soaked in shame, a decision tree for press inquiries. I wanted absolution, she offered practice. With Patel, I wrote conditions in short, unpoetic sentences that could survive air. Victor will comply with audits, resign from foundation governance, repay misapplied funds from personal accounts, and place the deed in a trust Aunt Gloria controls until regulators release it. He may receive assistance only for legitimate legal counsel. No PR consultants, no hush disguised as grants. He will not contact me between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m., and he will never again use my name or license to authenticate anything. We signed, dated, notarized. Mara arrived with a paper bag of oranges and an apology shaped like small talk. She read the conditions, jaw unsteady, then said, "He'll call you ungrateful." "He can learn a new word," I said. "Responsible." She nodded, then cried carefully, the way you cry when you fear your face will be quoted. "I don't know how to exist without his gravity," she said. "Try walking," I said, and handed her a pen. She signed as witness. We contacted recipients of the falsified grants using Patel's template, an explanation, a hotline, a promise of restitution from personal funds, and instructions for amended tax letters. Some wrote back with fury, some with relief. One attached a photograph of her mother at a ribbon cutting, smiling at the lie and the hope in the same frame. I stood in the post office line with cashier's checks like bandages and kept the receipts beside my toothbrush so I would see something clean before sleep. By Friday, Crown Ridge left a cooler voicemail. "We received counsel's letter, awaiting transfer." I forwarded it, labeled it Exhibit 27, and turned off my phone at 10 sharp. At 2:03 a.m., my apartment buzzer screamed, and someone started knocking my name into the wood. I didn't open the door immediately. I stood in the hallway feeling my pulse try stunts and letting the chain hold distance. "Noah," a voice said, low and threaded with rain. "Victor, I need to talk." Through the peephole, I watched a man who once sold certainty stand without a tie, smaller than his shoes. I opened the chain's limit. "We have nothing to discuss outside counsel," I said. He lifted the papers. Our conditions, already signed and notarized, the stamp still glistening. "I'm sorry," he said, the words unfamiliar but not rehearsed. He admitted more than we'd known. The blackmail included an old land deal that had toxins and bought silence with a scholarship. If it surfaces, the foundation burns for what I did before it existed, he said. Then it burns clean, I answered. We sat at my small table where truths line up like syringes. He called Patel on speaker and disclosed in full. No spin, no euphemisms. I wrote the time and date on the margin of the conditions, then slid the pen away like a finished procedure. You will apologize to the people you laundered hush through, I said. You will accept consequences without choreography. You will not touch the deed. He nodded. When he stood to leave, he asked about my unit, of all things. Bed 9 extubated, I said. For a second, he seemed to understand that people are not line items. At dawn, I bust to work. The city looked rinsed. Between med passes, I forwarded Patel's disclosures, confirmed Harbor's freeze, and texted Mara a photo. Deed transferred into a trust Aunt Gloria controls, pending regulator release. She replied with a picture of our grandmother's chipped mixing bowl filled with oranges. Aunt Gloria sent a message with no adjectives, only relief and instructions for lunch. In the afternoon, Victor emailed a statement he wrote himself. No PR lacquer, just names, dates, amounts, and the words, I misused trust. It landed badly with some and perfectly with the only audience that matters, the truth. The fallout kept doing what fallout does, articles, audits, a grand jury calendar, but the center shifted. At home, I slept through the night for the first time in weeks. At work, I trained a new nurse to count breaths by listening to shoulders, not just monitors. Mara found a real job at a community clinic's front desk and called me after her first difficult patient, proud and wrecked. Aunt Gloria took the first check for restitution to a family Victor had turned into a line item and came back carrying hugs that smelled like old coffee and weathered grace. One evening, Victor waited outside the clinic with his hands in his pockets and no performance in his posture. Boundaries feel like exile, he said. Practice, I reminded him. He told me he had started meetings and therapy. He didn't ask for praise, and I didn't offer it. We stood there in the honest noise of evening traffic. You didn't save me, he said, almost grateful. You saved the rest of us. No, I said. We stopped lying. That's all. Here is what I learned and what I'll hand you like a clean bandage. Dignity is choosing truth when performance pays better. Money can silence a room, but it cannot disinfect a wound. If a charity won't show receipts, it's a brand, not a blessing. Keep copies. Date margins. Say no early. Help people responsibly, with conditions in writing and someone sober holding the keys. And if love demands secrecy instead of accountability, it isn't love, it's leverage. On my next night shift, the monitors hummed their indifferent music and a patient's daughter asked if I believed people could change. I believe people can practice, I said, tucking a warm blanket around her mother's shoulders. Outside the ICU, the world kept tilting between headlines and habits, but inside the unit breath by breath still mattered. I clocked in, washed my hands, and let the simple ritual remind me. Truth, like care, is not dramatic, it's daily.